You do something quietly, without naming it, possibly without even noticing it. Someone asks if you need help, and you say no before you have even checked whether you do. A situation resolves itself without anyone getting hurt, and you still feel somewhere low in your chest that you were responsible for something. A conversation ends normally, and you replay it for hours wondering if you said the wrong thing. Nothing went wrong, no one is upset, and yet the guilt is there, sitting in you like a stone that appeared without explanation. That feeling has a name, or at least it has a shape, and understanding that shape can change quite a lot. What we are talking about today is guilt that arrives without a clear cause. Not the kind that follows a genuine mistake, not the kind that asks you to repair something. This is the kind that seems to live in you like background weather, that surfaces when things are going well, that whispers you have done something wrong, even when every available piece of evidence says you have not. It is one of the quieter forms of suffering because it is so easy to dismiss. You cannot point to the thing you did. You cannot apologize for it. You cannot fix it. You just carry it, and over time you start to assume that carrying it is simply what you do. So where does it come from? That is the question worth sitting with. And the answer, when you find it, tends to feel less like a revelation and more like recognition, like turning a corner and seeing something you always half knew was there. Most chronic sourceless guilt does not begin in adulthood. It begins much earlier in the particular emotional atmosphere of the home you grew up in. Children are exquisitely sensitive to the moods of the people around them, not because they are fragile, but because reading the adults in the room was genuinely important for survival. A child who could sense when a parent was stressed, withdrawn, or disappointed could adapt quickly and stay safe. That sensitivity is a gift, but it comes with a cost. When a child is repeatedly around an adult who is unhappy, anxious, or struggling, the child's nervous system starts to make an association. The adult is suffering. The child is nearby. Therefore, in some wordless, pre-logical way, the child concludes that the suffering must be connected to them, not through any conscious reasoning, just through proximity and pattern. This is not a flaw in the child's thinking. It is exactly the kind of fast, associative learning that young brains are built to do. The problem is that it produces a belief that can travel with a person for decades, that other people's pain is your responsibility, that your presence causes problems, that you need to earn your place by managing the emotional atmosphere around you. Carry that belief long enough, and you stop needing a specific reason to feel guilty. The guilt becomes the default setting. There is something else worth understanding here. Some children grow up in environments where love was conditional, not cruelly so, but subtly, where approval was abundant when you performed well, achieved things, stayed quiet, or met certain expectations, and cooler when you did not. In that kind of environment, children learn very quickly that their value is not inherent. It is earned. And earning it requires constant self-monitoring, constant checking, constant low-level anxiety about whether you are doing enough, being enough, taking up the right amount of space. When you grow up inside that structure, guilt is not an alarm bell for when you have done something wrong. It is simply the emotional cost of existing. This is also where a related pattern tends to emerge, the feeling that good things are somehow dangerous. You get a piece of good news, and instead of relief, there is a faint bracing, as though something bad must be coming to balance it out. You have a stretch of days that go well, and you find yourself waiting for the moment they do not. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a difficulty tolerating positive emotion, a kind of learned wariness around joy. It is not pessimism exactly, it is closer to a nervous system that was trained to expect instability and now cannot fully relax when things are calm. Here is how this can look in an ordinary week. You leave a social event early because you are tired, and for the next 2 days, you feel a vague but persistent guilt about it, even though no one said anything, even though you had a legitimate reason, even though people leave events early all the time. Or a colleague is having a difficult day and you notice yourself feeling quietly responsible, scanning your recent behavior for what you might have done. Or you take an afternoon for yourself, something genuinely restorative, and the whole time there is a thin voice asking whether you deserve this rest, whether there is something else you should be doing instead. None of those situations involve an actual wrong, but the guilt is real, and that is the important thing to understand. The feeling is real, even when the cause is not. The nervous system is not lying to you. It is responding to something. It is just responding to an old template rather than to the present moment. So what do you do with that? The first thing, and honestly the most useful one, is simply to name what is happening. When the guilt arrives and you cannot find a clear reason for it, try to say to yourself, plainly and without judgment, this is old guilt, not real-time guilt. This is a feeling my system learned to produce, and it does not automatically mean I have done something wrong. That sounds simple. It is not always easy. But the act of naming it creates a small distance between you and the feeling, just enough distance to stop taking it as literal truth. The second thing is to practice the question, whose responsibility was this actually? A lot of chronic guilt is misplaced responsibility, things you absorbed in childhood that were never yours to carry. When you feel guilty about someone else's mood, or about needing something, or about existing in a way that takes up space, it is worth pausing and asking where that sense of responsibility actually belongs. Not to assign blame to anyone, just to return the weight to the right address. There is also something worth sitting with around the idea of deserving. People who carry this kind of guilt often have a complicated relationship with the word deserve. They can argue for other people's worth without hesitation, but struggle to apply the same logic to themselves. If that resonates, it might be worth noticing how often you frame your own needs as burdens and other people's needs as legitimate. You are not a different category of person. The same basic rules about worth and rest and taking up space apply to you as they do to anyone you care about. One small practice that some people find genuinely helpful. When the guilt arrives, instead of immediately asking, "What did I do?" try asking, "What am I afraid of?" Because a lot of guilt, especially the sourceless kind, is anxiety wearing a different coat. The guilt says you did something wrong. Underneath it, the fear says, if I am not careful enough, something bad will happen, or someone will leave, or I will lose the safety I have. Getting to that fear, even just acknowledging it exists, often loosens the grip of the guilt in a way that arguing with the guilt directly does not. This is general insight, not a substitute for professional support. And if this kind of guilt feels heavy or persistent, a good therapist can help you work through the specific roots of it with much more care than any single conversation can offer. But even without that, just knowing that what you feel has a cause, that it is not evidence of something broken in you, that it is a learned response in a nervous system that was trying to protect you, that knowledge has real weight. You are not guilty of existing. You are not responsible for other people's internal weather. You did not cause the things that taught you to feel this way. And the fact that you feel things so carefully, so consciously, is not a flaw. It is just something that was shaped in you before you had any say in the matter. The quiet part of all this is that people who carry this kind of guilt are often among the most thoughtful, most conscientious people in any room. They feel it precisely because they care. The work is not to stop caring. It is to stop turning that care inward as accusation. If this felt like something you needed to hear today, you are probably not the only one. There is a new episode here every single day, and if this channel has become part of how you understand yourself, the subscribe button is right there whenever you are ready. No pressure. Just come back whenever it helps.